Welcome into a special edition of the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast, powered by Fantasy Data and supported by our friends here at Underdog Fantasy. I'm about to enter into a SuperFlex draft room, so we'll get started here. And I'm really excited to get into this. We're waiting for 7 people. So in the meantime, I'll talk about a few of our sponsors. The first, of course, is Underdog Fantasy. If you use the promo code FFF on Underdog, 100% deposit match up to $100. That will get you into this room and or any other of the Best Ball Superflex rooms up until the NFL draft. The big board but Superflex tournament is available until the NFL draft for about the next month. But you can also play pick'ems. They'll have the Best Ball Mania tournament. And I mean, it's a lot of fun. Like, drafting is a lot of fun. And so if you like a lot of this content, you most certainly can download the Underdog app, go to the App Store, the Google Play Store, wherever you get your apps, and 100% deposit match up to $100 is yours using the promo code FFF. Right now, we are in the Underdog Best Ball Superflex room waiting for 7 more people. So if you are in and available, go for it. In the meantime, we'll play our promo video, and then hopefully in the next minute, we'll be filling up more. So take this moment while I'm playing the promo and get logged into the Underdog Fantasy lobby.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Fanalists Podcast, powered by Underdog Fantasy and presented by Fantasy Data, home to some of the industry's most accurate rankings.
And welcome into a special edition of the Fantasy Football Fanalist Podcast. My name is Bradley Stalder, and I'll be your host tonight and drafter tonight as we're going through this Underdog Best Ball tournament. If you have not yet joined Underdog Fantasy, make sure you do use the promo code FFF. But I also want to draw our listeners' attention to Fantasy Data's subscriptions. We have a special code for all of our subscribers. If you use the promo code FFF20, that's 20% off all Fantasy Data subscriptions, and that stacks on any other promos that you find. So use this promo code FFF20, 20% off all Fantasy Data subscriptions. And I'll be using Fantasy Data moving forward. It's going to be one of my main sources for generating projections. Okay, because that's what a lot of us like to do in this offseason, not only do these best ball drafts, but also create projections, see what teams have the biggest needs, what are the median outcomes. But also one of the projects I'm taking on this offseason is to look at not only median outcomes, but also what is this player's like 70th percentile outcome? What is their 90th percentile outcome? Because especially in best ball tournaments, it's very useful to know what kind of ceilings we're talking about when we speak about particular players. Like, we can say, oh, they have access to a ceiling, or this player can access a ceiling. What does it mean for a player to actually access a ceiling? One example, while we're waiting for 3 people to join this best ball room, one example is Marquez Valdes-Scantling versus Mecole Hardman. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has a 90th percentile weekly finish of wide receiver 10 over his last 17 games. Like, he's looking really good. You want a wide receiver 10. He's a back-end wide receiver 1 more than 10% of the time. And that was on Aaron Rodgers' team, where he was also competing with targets part of the time with Robert Tonyan, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard. But flip over to Mecole Hardman, whose wide receiver 90th percentile outcome is wide receiver 28. Would you rather have the wide receiver 10 or wide receiver 28 over a 17 game span is like the top echelon of ceiling? Give me the wide receiver 10. And Mecole Hardman competing against Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle. Those are worse players in my opinion, but he's playing behind Travis Kelce and of course now the newly departed Tyreek Hill. So that's what one of the studies I'm going to look at over the course of the offseason, not only team median projections, where I expect these players to be, but also what type of ceilings do in particular wide receivers have. I think it makes sense that if a wide receiver gets the ball in their hands, good wide receivers tend to do good things with it, like the yards after the catch, or they're able to get downfield and make a long distance catch. Those are the two primary ways in which a wide receiver is pretty effective. Either catching the ball very far downfield, or they're able to catch the ball close to the line of scrimmage, make someone miss, and get extra yards after the catch. So those are the two ways in which a wide receiver primarily can generate fantasy points. So we want players who are able to do one of those two things, if not both those things. All right. So I am not in the top 9. Instead, I have the 12 spot. So I will share the screen of the board while I'm drafting. So any of those who are watching along with me are not going to be sniping. But there we go. Okay. I have the 12 spot. And at the 12 spot, it starts to get a little interesting because either you take one of the quarterbacks who falls, like if a Dak Prescott or Matthew Stafford falls to that spot, that's the type of player that I want to double tap. But if not, then the likes of a Cooper Kupp have fallen there. I've seen Christian McCaffrey fall pretty late. Corbin Welshare is saying good luck. Good luck to you as well. Corbin, I don't see. Oh, Corbin, you are the 101 and you're on the clock. So good luck as well. Corbin, let me know your Twitter handle so we can give you some shout out during and after this. We can continue this discussion. So Corbin, thanks for joining on in. Justin Herbert goes off the board after Corbin selects Josh Allen at 101, Lamar Jackson at 103. Wow. Patrick Mahomes now falling at least to the 104, if not further. This is a significant development. Patrick Mahomes getting drafted behind Lamar Jackson, behind Justin Herbert. Let me know your thoughts on this. What do you think? Is Patrick Mahomes the fourth best quarterback right now with the departure of Tyreek Hill? Or is he even later? Is Kyler Murray, who went 105 in this draft, is he ahead of Patrick Mahomes? We've seen 6 quarterbacks now go off the board. Joe Burrow at the 106. Jonathan Taylor, the first non-quarterback, going off the board here at the 107. At the 108, we're waiting. Right now, the scheduled ADP player is Christian McCaffrey, but instead it is Cooper Kupp who goes off the board at the 108. Cooper Kupp being the first wide receiver off the board. Tom Brady makes it to the first round. And this should not be surprising. It should not be surprising, but it is that Tom Brady is a first round pick. Although in this type of tournament, given that about a third of the field was able to draft Tom Brady, maybe 25% of the field was able to draft Tom Brady in the 13th round, he's kind of in a void in this type of tournament. Nevertheless, Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, I'm going to double tap. Because I do want parts of those offenses for a few reasons. One is it's very clear who the next players up are for Dallas. You get CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard. Those are the types of players that I would be interested in seeing who is around me at those places. Matthew Stafford is also very clear who the next targets are after Cooper Kupp, who's already gone off the board. It's going to be Allen Robinson, Tyler Higbee. We're not sure about whether Odell Beckham is going to be off, but Van Jefferson is always, an interesting play, looking at Van Jefferson's weekly outputs, like they're very interesting to me. Let me see where I put my document, but I'm not finding it right now. Van Jefferson has shown ceilings over his last little bit. Let me see. Is this the Untitled spreadsheet? Yes, it is. So Van Jefferson, I was mentioning earlier in the podcast about how I'm going to be interested in doing studies on wide receivers and their 70th, 80th, 90th percentile outcomes, because if we can target those players who are significantly higher in those particular thresholds, then we can differentiate between because I don't care about average. The reality is that like an average, like if you have an average, a player who has a 10th, a wide receiver 10 and a wide receiver 80, right? He's going to be on average wide receiver 45. But if you have a wide receiver who's at 20, right, and their ceiling is, or their floor is 70, right? That's going to be still average wide receiver 45, but give me the wide receiver who has shown access to that top 10 ceiling. That's who we want to target. We don't want to get bogged down by those floors, because the difference between a wide receiver 80 and wide receiver 70 week is not going to really matter that much. Same thing, like if you're translating it to points, like in fantasy points, the difference between 0 points and a 2 points in the floor, that doesn't matter. But what matters is when you get into those upper points, you want the ceiling access. So Van Jefferson, his wide receiver 67th percentile outcome is 31.6. So in his top third of range of outcomes over the last 17 games has been a mid-tier wide receiver 3. But his 90th percentile outcome is a mid wide receiver 2. Okay. To give context, like that's the type of player. Okay. Van Jefferson is in the same like 90th percentile outcome range as Marquez Callaway, Jacoby Myers, Odell Beckham, Marvin Jones. Like that's where we're looking. And just behind the Christian Kirks, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parkers. Okay, so like it just depends on where they are relative to ADP, and I can spend a lot more time like talking about this because now I'm at the ends. But I have the Rams and the Dallas Cowboys because those are I double tap quarterback, which in a SuperFlex league you want quarterbacks early. You want at least one in the first 2 rounds. And if I can get a second one that's a top 10, then I've got a distinct advantage over the field. Okay. So those are some important things that I'm keeping in mind as I'm drafting on there. Okay, cool. So I'm up here in just a moment and I'm looking and I don't see anything that's an obvious stack. But I'm scrolling down a little bit. I'm looking for Rams or Dallas Cowboys. And I don't see anything that's sticking out to me. I do like to get my tight end in the first 3 rounds that I know is not going to bust. And so that's going to be Mark Andrews. And I've been drafting a lot of Joe Mixon lately. So I think I'm going to go with Nick Chubb. Okay, I'm going to go with Nick Chubb. So that way I have, coming out of the first 4 rounds, I have my 2 quarterbacks. I have Mark Andrews, the number 2 tight end in my evaluation. And I have a running back 1 who has shown time and again that he doesn't need receptions. Remember, Underdog is a half-point PPR setting, so Nick Chubb can be a very valuable running back, much more than a full-point PPR setting. Like Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, like in a full PPR, Aaron Jones with no Devontae Adams, it makes sense that Aaron Jones would be much closer to Nick Chubb. But with Nick Chubb on an offense that's pretty ambiguous right now, we don't know the Deshaun Watson situation. Kareem Hunt could get cut tomorrow, and that would free up Nick Chubb to run on third downs if they trust D'Ernest Johnson behind him. I don't think D'Ernest Johnson would move into a sole pass catching role. He would eat into Nick Chubb. It wouldn't give all 100% Chubb, but like they signed D'Ernest Johnson. There's not guaranteed money really on Kareem Hunt's contract at this point. So I'm really confident. I also steered away from DeAndre Swift. I could have taken Swift there, but I have a lot of DeAndre Swift at this point, and I'm not going to be doing that. So looking at this draft so far, it looks like one player in this room does not have a quarterback yet. Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs. Looks like Updog is just going straight wide receiver. Maybe forgot that this is a super flex team. I'm interested in the first pick here. Corbin has gone three straight quarterbacks, and then he went DeAndre Swift, which I really like. But I think that there's a kind of a hedge of risk right now. We don't know the Trey Lance situation. We don't know the Deshaun Watson situation. Supposedly, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get traded. That's the rumor right now. However, we don't know. Deshaun Watson could end up on the commissioner's exempt list. I do like getting Kyle Pitts there at the 5-1, the 5th round. So Corbin, I like how he's hedged a little bit. He's still gotten a lot of value at his running back and tight end. Discounted Kyle Pitts. That's a lot of good happening for that particular part of the draft. So once again, if you use the promo code FFF20, that gets you 20% off all Fantasy Data subscriptions. And as this is the time of the year where you're creating projections, where we're looking at depth charts, we're seeing who has been signed, free agency, and then projecting what are the needs for this team. Like we can say, oh, they need a wide receiver. Like how big of a wide receiver are they looking for? Are they going to address it later on in the draft? Or are they going to try to get one of the alphas who commands a significant target share? I'm looking at the Atlanta Falcons in particular. I looked at all of the players that they have currently signed to their roster. If you were to add up their last seasons, their 2021 target shares cumulatively, you'd only get about 60% target share. What? That means one of two things. That means either they're going to sign 2 players. Oh, man. Okay. We're going to pause here just for a moment. And I'm looking here. I don't see any Rams. I don't see any Cowboys. Once again, I see Zeke Elliott, but I'm steering clear of that. Breece Hall, I've been very comfortable drafting here in the end of the 5th round, beginning of the 6th round. Now I do need a wide receiver in a half-point PPR. I want my wide receivers either to get a lot of volume, which will make up for the half point, or to be in scoring position. And, I've been taking a lot of Deonte Johnson. I'm going to take Deonte Johnson here if I don't time out. There we go. All right, Deonte Johnson, the 6th one. I'm happy getting Deonte there. I think that Mitch Trubisky is just going to continue to feed him the ball. I did a little research on the relationship Mitchell Trubisky had with his number 1 wide receiver, and it was something like 75% of the time, the leading wide receiver for Mitchell Trubisky game had a 25% or higher target share. And in 40% of those games, that particular wide receiver had a 30% plus target share. So Mitchell Trubisky has had a tendency of 30% of the time, 40% of the time, almost 30% of the time getting his lead wide receiver a 30+% target share. So I'm not too worried about that. You want players who are very involved and not a lot of risk. Deonte Johnson, I don't think carries a lot of that volume risk that other players around that stage may carry. Like Mike Williams, there are questions about his volume in that Chargers offense. DK Metcalf has serious questions not only about Like, he will get the target share, the 25+%, but the Seattle Seahawks ran the fewest plays in the NFL last season, and it wasn't particularly close. In fact, they ran the equivalent of about 16 games worth of plays in 17 games. They lost, almost a whole game of plays because their pace was so slow. So no, there's not a lot of confidence in DK Metcalf. I was disheartened when they traded Russell Wilson. In fact, the day before, I had done one of these SuperFlex drafts, and I had gotten Russell Wilson stacked with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what's the difference between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf? Well, looking at their 90th percentile outcomes, DK Metcalf, let me see, Control F, that out. DK Metcalf's 90th percentile outcome is wide receiver 8, and his 67th percentile outcome is wide receiver 23. Okay, so 23 and 8. Whereas Lockett's 67th percentile outcome is wide receiver 8, as 90th percentile is wide receiver 5. So Tyler Lockett's 67th percentile outcome over his last 17 games is the same as DK Metcalf's 90th percentile outcome. Tyler Lockett has some of the highest ceilings among all wide receivers. In fact, looking at his 67th percentile outcome, there are only 4 players who in their last 17 games have a higher 67th percentile outcome than Tyler Lockett, and that's Deebo Samuel, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, and Cooper Kupp. Tyler Lockett is getting disrespected. And even in the games that Geno Smith had to start in place of Russell Wilson last year, we saw 2 bust games, but 1 wide receiver 5 outcome from Tyler Lockett. So yeah, we should have a lot of confidence in Tyler Lockett still producing boom weeks, a best ball target for sure. He is extremely undervalued in these types of formats. All right, so now it's getting close to my turn. I'm looking and I'm seeing Allen Robinson just went off the board. I'm a little bummed that I got sniped on the Robinson Prescott stack, but there hasn't been much ability for me to be stacking at this point. We'll see who falls to me, but I've got my eyes on one particular player, and then maybe I'll draft out of need. We'll see. Okay, I've been drafting a lot of Travis Etienne. I'm actually happy that he went off the board there because I don't have to draft him. It balances itself out. Someone else reached on him. I'm up, and Dalton Schultz is available at about ADP, and he'll stack with my Dak Prescott. So not only do I hit on tight end, but I also get the stack with Dak. And then looking as well, I don't see a lot of Rams or Dallas Cowboys, so I'm going to go with Michael Thomas. I don't have a lot of Michael Thomas. I feel like at pick 85, that's a good value, and I just mentioned him as over his last 17 games has the ceiling, and I know that's Drew Brees throwing him the ball, but also some of that was with Taysom Hill throwing him the ball as well. So, I mean, look, the reality is that Michael Thomas falling this late, even if Taysom Hill is his quarterback, we've seen Michael Thomas be useful for fantasy. So as long as he's healthy, it's going to be, and in the 8th round, that's good. That's good for me. And we're only starting 2 wide receivers. So now I can just start hammering wide receiver. I've got my tight end that I'm happy about. I've got 2 running backs that I'm pretty confident are going to be studs. I'm happy with Breece Hall there. I'd take Breece Hall over Zeke Elliott, James Conner, J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, all of those players. I think Travis Etienne is getting disrespected. However, where his ADP is, that's why I've been getting a lot of him. So there we go. I've got my 2 quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Nick Chubb, Breece Hall, Deontay Johnson, Michael Thomas, Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz. So I'm set at tight end. I'm set at quarterback. I'm not going to draft any more tight ends. And now I can just focus on running backs, wide receivers, and then maybe if a quarterback falls to me, I'd be happy with a quarterback falling to me. But yeah, so I'm feeling good about my draft. Not super duper stacky, but it is what it is. Now I can let the draft come to me, let the value come to me. And I like consolidating the onesie positions in these types of drafts, because then that allows me to have more positional flexibility later on the draft. I don't feel like I have to take a tight end later. I don't feel like I have to take a quarterback, at a particular spot. I can wait for the draft, as I said, to come to me, let the value now fall to me. I don't need to reach on really anybody. Hopefully I didn't talk Corbin into too much Tyler Lockett here. He's already drafted 3 running backs. But I don't know. There are still a lot of wide receivers that I'm very interested in at this point. Interesting that Corbin goes with a 4th quarterback at this point. Only quarterbacks and wide receivers or running backs, except for 1 tight end for Corbin here. He's in the YouTube chat here. So thanks, Corbin, for jumping on in. If you have questions about these SuperFlex drafts, I'd love to discuss some of the ways in which I've been drafting, and things have been working out pretty well. Yeah, he went Tyler Lockett there. It's a beautiful thing, influencing the draft. Unless he really liked Tyler Lockett, then Corbin, let me know. You've got time in between your next pick. Nevertheless, I've been steering clear. It's interesting that he avoided the stack of Gabe Davis too, because he drafted Josh Allen first overall, or as the 101. So there we go. Okay. If you're liking how this draft is going, if you're interested in finding out more about Underdog Fantasy, if you want to draft against me and you have not done so, go to Underdog Fantasy on the App Store, download the app, or go on to underdogfantasy.com. And for first-time deposit, use the promo code FFF at Underdog for 100% deposit match up to $100. That's right. In this economy, $100 fills your tank of gas. Take that and have some fun playing on Underdog Fantasy in these best ball drafts. There will be Best Ball Mania later on after the NFL draft. But right now, I am in a SuperFlex Bestball tournament draft. And it's a lot of fun drafting against some pretty tough competition, but also there are some ways in which we can take advantage of a rake or two maybe here in the draft. It's interesting to see that Gabe Davis has fallen all the way to the 100, pick 100. It's that's the Jameson Crowder effect. People are really buying into Jameson Crowder, and I am too. Jameson Crowder has not had lower than a 14% target share in any one of his seasons. So he's going to be a player who's playing out of the slot. He's going to get targets. I think he's younger than Cole Beasley, but he's going to play in the slot and not need to be the number 1 target in this Buffalo offense. Okay. Now it comes to a time where I'm looking at my team and I see I don't need a lot of quarterback. I don't need tight end, but running back here, Tony Pollard. And I'm also going to look and see if there are players at this point that Drake London. So I'm going to take Drake London here. And that was kind of inspired by today's thread, and I want to give a shout out to DF Bean Counter, Drew Osenchuk. If you don't follow him on Twitter, he is an excellent follow. Does an amazing job. Bulletproof Fantasy. He will end up having his rookie guide come out, but it's a go-to for me almost every year, looking at what players using his criteria are bulletproof. That means 75% of the time they hit, and there's only a 25% bust rate, or 25% or lower bust rate based on his criteria that he looks at. And I found it to be super duper helpful avoiding the Terrace Marshalls of the world last year. I had 0 shares of Terrace Marshall who busted in, and Drew had Marshall ranked higher, but he had Marshall ranked as a bust, and has been a total avoid for me. So Drew just came out today and said that Drake London, not Treylon Burks, not Garrett Wilson, but it's Drake London who is his wide receiver 1 in this class, and that he's going to be a bulletproof prospect at getting a first-round draft capital. That's what his anticipation is. So there you go. Drake London is a wide receiver that I'm interested in based on the recent prospect guides that have come out. So follow Drew at DFB Encounter. He's a great follow, and make sure to subscribe to him. Do all the things. Okay. Love him. Okay. So Corbin, you're going to be back on the clock here in a second, but I want to post what you said in the chat as well. As you said, he's a high upside player. Hope he gets traded, and other receivers in the area of competition questions, trying something different. Yeah. So I think that the name of the game in best ball is upside. And if you don't know what upside is, that's a problem, especially for your wide receivers, where wide receivers are the ones who are most likely going to fill your flex spot. And so even in a tournament like this, where you're only starting 2 wide receivers and then a flex, like you're discounting relative to, the big board non-SuperFlex, where you start 3 wide receivers and probably another wide receiver in your flex spot. You want to be playing wide receivers in your flex spot. They tend to outperform over the course of a weekly finishes your running backs, unless you get like super duper lucky. So what I'll probably be doing over the next few rounds is just drafting wide receivers that have shown me that they have upside. Okay. So other wide receivers that are still on the board that have shown me some up. So okay. I'm going to look at some and just talk about some of the players that what their upside actually looks like. Over the last 17 games, Brandon Ayuk's 67th percentile outcome has been wide receiver 29. Okay, Christian Kirk has been wide receiver 22, so Kirk has shown a higher upside at the 67th percentile weekly finish or higher. Rondell Moore is 50th. Okay, Russell Gage, 15.6. And him moving to Tom Brady's offense with Chris Godwin coming off an ACL injury, like that's going to probably be a target for me right now, is the Christian Kirk, Russell Gage wide receivers at this turn if they come to me. If not, I'll probably pivot to a Tyler Boyd to stay with a Cincinnati offense that's pretty good and will be passed first. And Tyler Boyd's shown some ceiling. Let me pull up his 67th percentile outcome. Tyler Boyd, his 67th percentile outcome is wide receiver 28. So, I mean, that's okay. It's still not amazing. It's around the same as Brandon Ayuk. So, like, why take Ayuk when you could take Tyler Boyd around later? Will Fuller is also an interesting player here, but it looks like Christian Kirk did go off. I am going to go Russell Gage. Okay. I'm tapping there. And then Will Fuller. Where did Will Fuller go? So I'm drafting for upside right now because I'm pretty happy with what types of players, what types of wide receivers are there. And I'm going to probably get some value at running back now. Nick Chubb, Breece Hall, Tony Pollard. I'm probably going to look for some running back to fall to me that I'm happy with. So I'm actually very pleased with the tight end group that I have, the quarterback group. I'm going to probably have to target some more quarterbacks here. I don't know if I'll go 5 quarterbacks, but I definitely want to give myself some players who will be falling there. Maybe I should have taken a quarterback, but nevertheless. Okay, so Corbin, he's adding some more commentary. I'd love to interact with this. But with the format, top 3 advance from the first round, teams leaning more running back by committee and having only 2 wide receiver spots, take more risk and take late upside receivers over running backs. Yes, you definitely want to take these wide receivers. Like, if you know a wide receiver is 70-60% of the time going to get you 10 points, like, what are you going to get? Are you going to bank on that, or are you going to hope that the running back 1 on Minnesota, Dalvin Cook, goes down, Alexander Madison becomes a thing, right? Madison goes off here in the 12th round, but there's still players like DJ Chark, Kenny Galladay, who are going to command 20% of their team's target shares. Like, I know that you want to swing for upside, but it's boom bust at that point. Why don't you take shots on? You're already drafting running backs early. Like, if you're if you're dead in the water, unless you've got a handcuff situation, even handcuffing is a whole other discussion. But you can take a lot more shots on wide receivers because they're so much more volatile. Like, if you have 3 wide receivers all playing all at the same time, there's going to be 3+ wide receiver sets. A lot of the times in the NFL, there's most likely only going to be 1 running back. So the opportunities are going to be there for the wide receivers to have boom plays or downfield plays that allow for higher scoring. And that's what Corbin's doing. You've seen 4 straight wide receivers go off: Lockett, Robert Woods, Rashad Bateman, Alan Lazard with no Devontae Adams. Looking at Lazard's outcome, and then Tim Patrick as well. Those are some really good picks there. Lazard, wrong search key here. Lazard is not showing up. I guess not. Nevertheless. Tim Patrick, though, I love him as a pick because he's wide receiver 33, is the 67th percentile outcome. That is in the same 17-game range as like Terry McLaurin, DJ Chark, Gabe Davis, Marvin Jones. Okay. And just behind the Brandon Ayuk's, Devonta Smiths of the world, Rashad Bateman's of the world. So I love Tim Patrick there. And with a quarterback upgrade, I think Corbin has just exhibited a great choice in selecting Tim Patrick there. Okay. So there we go. And right now, my wide receiver room is looking good. I'll probably address it later. But now I'm going to look at running back and quarterback and see who comes to me at running back and quarterback. Okay, cool. So thanks everyone for popping in. It's been a lot of fun so far drafting this offseason with you on Underdog Fantasy. Make sure that you're giving us a like on YouTube. Give us the thumbs up. That means a lot to the podcast. That means a lot to the YouTube channel. Allows me to be doing more of this in the off season. Commenting as well. Corbin has let me know he's in here. So yeah, it's a lot of fun interacting with the guests. Also drafting against each other, talking strategy, and giving insight. So I appreciate Corbin and all of his sharing and also his drafting. Corbin's team is looking pretty good, having those 4 quarterbacks and now going wide receiver. Okay. Oh, Ronald Jones just went off. That's a player that I was really happy about getting much later yesterday before the news broke that Ronald Jones signed a 1-year contract with the Kansas City Chiefs. So he will be playing in tandem with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This might be the end of Jerick McKinnon signing or re-signing. And there's a player that has really fallen in ADP that I'm interested in taking at this point, and it just makes sense for me to take if they stay on the board available, and that is Jimmy Garoppolo. He's ADP 115, and I'm getting him at 156. That's value. And I don't care what you have to say about Jimmy Garoppolo. Getting him 40 spots after ADP is kind of ridiculous. I'm also interested in getting... I don't have a lot of Gus Edwards at this point. I know it's a little bit of a reach, but he's not going to be there when I come back. So now I've got Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Jimmy Garoppolo, all at or after ADP. Nick Chubb, I reached a tad on. Breece Hall, I got at a discount. Tony Pollard, I reached on by 3 picks. Gus Edwards, I did reach on. Deontay Johnson, I reached on. Michael Thomas, I got at an 8-pick discount. Drake London, I did reach on a little bit. Russell Gage, I reached on just a little bit. Will Fuller, I reached on just a little bit. So I've been reaching a little bit in each of these, nibbling, but that's what happens when you're stuck at the turn, is you're going to have to be reaching a tad to get players that you want, either based on upside or stacking or things like that. All right. Corbin is talking about some of the rookie receivers, and they went right before, not realizing how much of a jump one of them on the Chiefs Packers is a gamble. Right. The Chiefs have 2 picks at the end of the first round, and 2 picks, not just 1, 2 picks at the end of the first round. So that's a huge deal. And same with the Packers. They've got 2 picks at the end of the first round as well. One, I think, at 22, and the other in the late 20s. I haven't memorized the other one. The 22 one, I believe, is the Raiders pick. But nevertheless, yeah, so it's looking real good. I'm happy with how things are going with my draft, and it looks like Corbin is pretty happy, aside from getting some of the rookie wide receivers taken. I think I am going to hit some of the wide receivers pretty heavy continuing forward. We'll see who else comes at a discount as well. Maybe there'll be some value hanging out. Okay, so Corbin is on the clock, and Corbin goes with Corey Davis. That's just such a value. Corey Davis going at the 168, and his ADP, I don't know, it didn't load for me there. I picked the wrong thing. Corey Davis's ADP was wide receiver 156, so a 12-spot discount on Corey Davis. I like that pick there. And Cole Kmet also could be the number 2 option, pass-catching option in Chicago. I did look at the Chicago Bears projections, and their wide receiver core is not robust. That's putting it kindly. The wide receivers currently signed to the roster: Darnell Mooney, Byron Pringle, Equanimous St. Brown, December Walker, Isaiah Coulter, Daz Newsome. Mooney, he could be getting a 30% target share. Pringle could be getting a 16% target share. Cole Kmet, though, he could be 22% target share, and that would be pretty nice from Justin Fields, who's one of the most accurate downfield throwers, both in college and what we've seen in the pros so far. So there you go. Okay. Was between Kmet and Tonyan. I think at this point, we don't know what Robert Tonyan's ACL progress is like. He tore it mid-season, which is better than tearing it like the Super Bowl, like Odell Beckham did. However, Tonyan has the touchdown upside. I don't know if Cole Kmet has quite the touchdown upside that Robert Tonyan has. Just the double-digit touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers in an offense where they lost their number 1 touchdown scorer, and there's been a tendency for them to throw. Maybe all those touchdowns go to Aaron Jones, but maybe they don't. We shall see. Now, there's a wide receiver coming up pretty quickly that I'm so happy when this particular player comes to me. His 67th percentile outcome is wide receiver 27 over his last 17 games, and that's in the same range as Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, Julio Jones, Jacoby Myers, Chase Claypool, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And he stays on the board for me to pick him, and that is Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne is one of the discounts of this draft, in my opinion. New England, he had 3 top 10 weeks, and he also had a 25 week, a 22 week, and a 16 weekly finish, like a player that I just can't ignore. And then I'm also going to draft Chris Carson here in the 16th round. I just can't quit Chris. If he's healthy and available, that's pretty tough. So I like those picks, and it's hammering out my biggest needs at this point, which are running back and wide receiver. Now, looking at quarterback, I probably am going to have to hit on one more quarterback before the end. So that'll probably be here at the 17-18 turn. I'll hit on a quarterback most likely. Okay. Awesome. This has been a lot of fun this evening. If you like more of these, you want to see some of the previous ones that I've done or that Billy and I have done, or that I've hosted some guests on. I did one yesterday with Todd Burrows of Run the Daylight podcast. Todd's one of the smartest big best ball players. He has a lot of edges. He does a lot of FFPC tournament drafts. So there you go. Corbin's saying he completely agrees. The people assume Patriots will draft a high-round rookie, but you'd be surprised if they didn't get it and was Bourne and Myers again with Mac in his second year. Mac Jones was a good starting quarterback. He wasn't great. It wasn't exceptional. But he was good. And for all of the rookie busts that we had, Trey Lance busted. Trevor Lawrence busted. Relative expectation. We had these rookie quarterbacks just not performing. Justin Fields was, okay, it was the Nagy effect. Let's be honest. Matt Nagy was not managing that team very well. You don't draft a quarterback like that with that type of skill set and say, you know what? The best way for our team to beat the Green Bay Packers is to put out Andy Dalton. Think that the Red Rifle is going to do it. No, the Red Rifle is not going to do it. He can put up fantasy points. He had more 300 passing yard games than Ryan Tannehill, but Justin Fields is the better quarterback, better skill set, hands down. And I don't know if the Bears didn't anticipate that Justin Fields would be available to them, but that was a mistake. That was a mistake on their part. And I think it set him back 6 months, a year in Justin Fields' development, just playing behind. We saw how he got eaten alive in his starting debut against the Cleveland Browns. So, the Patriots, they haven't been tied to anyone. There's always been chatter about, there was chatter earlier in the offseason, Michael Thomas, Calvin Ridley. What if Bill Belichick is planning? I think Bill Belichick is happy with spending all the money that he did last offseason, and now he's just going to shore up some other positions. They're going to continue to develop and grow their spots. So I'm not worried about the Patriots. They're gonna figure it out. Okay. So there we go. Okay. And as I mentioned before, this podcast sponsored by Fantasy Data. Use promo code FFF20 for 20% off all Fantasy Data subscriptions, and that stacks. So if you just want some access to small subscriptions, you use this code. If you want to buy the API, use this code. It gets you, if you're trying to do projections, which a lot of us do, I do myself, and you want to use the data to help you create your own projections, of course, go watch our most watched YouTube video, which is creating your own projections. But also use the promo code FFF20 when you're checking out to buy this API data. It's really, really important for you to have these accurate projections. You don't want to be making silly mistakes in your projections, embarrassing yourself, when you're putting out your rankings. I think this player is going to get a 40% target share. No, No, they're not going to get a 40% target share. Stop saying things like that. It's ridiculous. That's unsustainable. I don't know what data is going to do it, but make sure you use that promo code and it will get you that 20% off on the Fantasy Data subscription. Okay. And Corbin's saying, yeah, Bill doesn't make moves often like that. And Julio Jones might be enough. Old dusty Julio Jones. I don't know about that. But I don't know if Julio might go to the Colts. That's been the rumor. Rejoining Matt Ryan. I think that would be good for both Ryan and the Colts and Julio. I don't know how much Julio has left in the tank, but it's probably going to be a low risk, low reward type of deal. I would be surprised if Julio has anything really left in the tank. Okay, I'm looking here, and I'm going to take my fourth quarterback, and I'm going to stack him with Michael Thomas. So that's good. And then I'm looking as well at some of the wide receivers that are definitely not going to come back to me. And one of them is, okay, we're going to go with Sterling Shepard. Now, Sterling Shepard is a reach at that point, but his upside is undeniable in the Giants' offense. I know he's coming off of an Achilles injury. I think it's an Achilles injury, but Sterling Shepard is 67th percentile outcome over his last 17 games. Wide receiver 20.8, and that's including games he left early in. Sterling Shepard had a wide receiver 8 and wide receiver 4. He was also wide receiver 11, wide receiver 35, 23, 19. Okay. And he left a lot of those games early. So if he's on the field, Sterling Shepard is going to be involved. And that's why, like, Kadarius Toney will be a really useful fantasy asset until Sterling Shepard comes back, because they're gonna play Sterling Shepard over Kadarius Toney unless there's some injury to Toney. And Toney's shown that he can't stay healthy. Kenny Golladay has shown he can't stay healthy. Evan Ingram no longer on the team. There's a lot of opportunity still if players can stay healthy in the Giants offense. Saquon Barkley hopefully is healthy. Okay, so I'm looking at my team construction right now. I have 4 quarterbacks. I'm set there. My 2 tight ends I'm not touching. Once again, running backs I'm at 5. Wide receivers at 7. And then Hayden Winks has just came out with an article, and his base construction is a 4-5-8-3 construction. But I'm going to deviate from that a little bit. I'm not going to go 4-5-8-3. Instead, I'm going to probably go 4-6-8-2. Maybe 4-5-9-2. But I'm not touching quarterback, and I'm not touching tight end. Just depend, and I'll get at least one wide receiver. We'll see who's still on the board at those times. Nevertheless, I'm not committing to one, but that's the base based on what Hayden's article. If you haven't checked him out, make sure you search on Twitter at Hayden Winks, and you'll be able to find the article he posted today. Is a lot of awesome research that I've applied to this draft, in addition to Josh Larky, who's come on the podcast as well, talking about especially the early picks. And if you notice from my early picks, I went double quarterback, and you want quarterbacks in this setting. You want your stud quarterbacks. And as Corbin and myself have done, we drafted 2 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. But then I went tight end. If you don't get an elite tight end, you need to wait. And right now, I'm only comfortable drafting Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce in the first 4 rounds. Other than that, I'm going to let Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts fall. Like, Kyle Pitts in the 5th round is good value, but I'm not going to draft Kyle Pitts in the 4th round. I guess the 5-1 is technically almost the 5th round, but nevertheless, you kind of get it. But then after that, I went Chubb and Breece Hall. I got my running back in the first 4 rounds, and then I hit it up with another running back in that next round. And then I took Tony Pollard to stack with Dak, but also because Tony Pollard, if Zeke gets hurt, which we saw Zeke get hurt last year, Tony Pollard is a player who can ascend into that running back one conversation. But he also, Josh Larkey, as I mentioned before, formerly a player profiler, right now we're awaiting where he's going to go, but I'm sure great things are going his way. He mentioned Tony Pollard averaged over 70 yards per game in a part-time role last year on the Dallas offense. And with the departure of some of the wide receivers, it would be really nice if Tony Pollard got even more of a role. So Tony Pollard, I felt really great about drafting there. And I mentioned that Michael Thomas is one of the players, if he's healthy, that could just absolutely set the league on fire still. Those types of players, their talent doesn't go away. It's usually off the field issues that get in their way, like the Antonio Browns or the Odell Beckhams. Okay, I'm looking here, and I'm going to take one more shot at running back, given that there is one that I'm interested in, and that's Keyshawn Vaughn. I know Leonard Fournette re-signed, but talk about a very powerful handcuff. That's a player that could look really, really good in an offense. And I'm going to take one last wide receiver here, and that's Deonte Harris. Deonte Harris as my 20th round pick. He's one of my favorites to take very, very late. Deonte Harris, also aka Deonte Hardy, had one top 10 finish last year. His wide receiver, 90th percentile outcome, wide receiver 29. Okay, and that's in the same range as the LaVisca Chenaults of the world, the Mecole Hardmans of the world, but you're getting him super duper late, ahead of KJ Hamler, ahead of Darius Slayton. So, and if there's even usable quarterback play, Deonte Harris has shown that he can. He's shown some love here. Corbin saying, "I'll show you the backup I liked with the last pick." I'd love to see who Corbin's going to pick. We saw Zach Pascal go off the board in the middle of the 20th round. I don't hate that pick. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles signaled that they're not going to address the wide receiver position pretty significantly because they signed Zach Pascal and they lost out on the Calvin Ridley sweepstakes. Like, they didn't want to get an alpha. I don't think Calvin Ridley is an alpha, like the big prototypical alpha wide receiver. But Zach Pascal was very useful at Indy. He was occasionally scoring touchdowns, always was pesky, getting 4 or 5 targets. And I think that's a good role for him. I also think this really satisfies the lust that I have. The lust that I have for where did my brain go? Oh, Dallas Goedert. That's where I was getting at. I love drafting Dallas Goedert in these types of drafts if I miss out on some of the other tight ends. So there you go. Corbin, were you drafting Josh Gordon? Is that you were taking a shot on? Because Josh Gordon could be an option for Kansas City now that Josh Gordon is now that Tyreek Hill is gone. So just to recap really quickly, my team is what I went: Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Mark Andrews in the first 3 rounds, then Nick Chubb. I don't have a lot of Chubb, so I wanted some more exposure to him. I've usually taken Joe Mixon over him, but I feel like they're in similar tiers and and similar ranges of outcomes. Chubb, Breece Hall at the 512, then Deontay Johnson I took. I like taking Deontay Johnson. Dalton Schultz, Michael Thomas, Tony Pollard, Drake London, Russell Gage, Will Fuller. Those are 3 players that I think have a lot of upside. And in this, you want tournament plays, right? You don't want to just settle. And Russell Gage, I think, is an extremely undervalued tournament play. In fact, Russell Gage, talk about not only a high 67th percentile outcome, because Russell Gage is very much up there. Gage, his 67th percentile outcome is higher than Stephon Diggs, higher than Deontay Johnson, higher than Darnell Mooney, higher than Jalen Waddle, higher than Michael Pittman or CD Lamb or AJ Brown or Jarvis Landry or T. Higgins. Okay, Russell Gage over his last 17 games has 4 top 10 wide receiver finishes. He also has a 14 and a 20. If he hits near the top. And with him now getting Tom Brady instead of Matt Ryan in an offense where we saw Mike Evans only get a 16% target share and Gronk may or may not be back, like Russell Gage will have a role in this offense with Godwin coming off the ACL injury. And also, the nice thing about Russell Gage is he also has not only that that ceiling of 67th percentile outcome, but also wide receiver 8 is his 90th percentile outcome. That's higher than DK Metcalf or Keenan Allen, the aforementioned CD Lamb, Cortland Sutton, Devonta Smith, all players who are going ahead of Russell Gage in ADP. So I love Gage at this point. It's super sneaky stack. Corbin said that one of his late picks is Chris Evans from Cincinnati. I like that pick. If Joe Mixon goes down, he can be a super valuable player. He was a pass-catching capable back, and with Samaje Perine, lots of questions. I don't like Perine. I don't think a lot of people do. But Perine's role changed from his previous, like if we looked earlier in his career, Samaje Perine was a plotter between the tackles for Washington, averaging like 3.5 yards a carry. Not the type of player that you would think would be stealing carries or touches from Joe Mixon. You'd think that it would be the more agile running back in Chris Evans, but nevertheless, here we are. After Will Fuller, I drafted Jimmy Garoppolo to get my third quarterback. I think Jimmy G, coming off the shoulder surgery, is a player that I will wait for his value. And I think getting him at 156 instead of 115, that's a great value. Getting Jimmy Garoppolo at the end of the 13th round. Gus Edwards at the 14th. Kendrick Bourne, I talked about. I love the upside of Bourne. Chris Carson in the 16th round. Give me all the Carson. Taysom Hill, 17-12. To stack with Michael Thomas, Sterling Shepard, Keyshawn Vaughn, and Deonte Harris. I'm trying to rotate through, but Keyshawn Vaughn just still somehow sneaks into, that spot for me. So ultimately, I'm very happy with this draft. Love the comments, love the commentary back and forth, love drafting against everyone. Make sure you, if you haven't download the Underdog Fantasy app, make sure you do use the promo code FFF for 20% or 100% deposit match up to $100 when you deposit for the first time on Underdog Fantasy. They're a great partner here. And of course, the Fantasy Data live stream. Make sure that you go check out Fantasy Data when you're using your projections and use the code FFF20 for 20% off all Fantasy Data subscriptions when you're creating your projections this time of year. And Corbin, thanks. Corbin says he enjoyed it. Make sure you give the like, subscribe on YouTube so we can continue to make these. Corbin, it was great drafting against you. Thanks so much. Appreciate you. And we'll see all of you in the best ball streets. Good luck, everyone. And we'll see you later.